Hey everyone and welcome to Storytime. My name is Jake and today we are going to be looking at a story from r/prorevenge. Now this is one of my favourite stories that I've ever read out and it was very long, so this is why I'm recording this intro after I've read it, but make sure you stick around till the end of it because it is really good. Shady former colleagues bullied me into quitting a small town teaching job, so I had their entire school shut down. I've always been a shy person, and I grew up in a large urban area. In high school, I had friends, but we were the nerdy type and thought of as losers. I was one of two girls in our core friend group of 4 kids. Of course, we eventually dated the guys in our group. The youngest in our group was one of the boys, Doug, in 9th grade, and the oldest was a boy, Clayton, in 11th. The other girl, Sarah, and I were in 10th. I dated Doug all through high school, for which I was relentlessly teased for by people outside of the group because he's a bit more than a year younger than me. Sarah and Clayton married in college and are still happily married 5 years later. Doug and I, for our part, got married once he finished college, and we have been married for almost 4 years. We have a 1-year-old daughter, Raquel. Both Doug and Clayton eventually got careers in IT. Sarah and Clayton have their own 1-year-old daughter, Amber. Sarah has a small but thriving home business selling refurbished furniture on eBay that she and Clayton find on weekends. The reason I give so much backstory is that our friend group is pretty isolated. Chalk it up to years of bullying, being made fun of, excluded, you name it. It happened to all 4 of us in school, even in primary and middle school. Even now, in my late 20s, I don't really have close friends besides Sarah, Clayton, and of course my husband Doug, who is my best friend. This is true, even though we moved all the way from the Midwest for Doug's career, we're still close enough and well off enough so that we can regularly fly out to see our friends. And vice versa. Doug makes more than enough money to support all 3 of us on his salary alone, especially in our state, and always says it's okay if I am a stay-at-home mum. However, in this new environment, I thought I might have a fresh start, to work on being more outgoing, as it were. No one in my new town knew me from when I was a kid, and a total reject. Doug's father passed away, and so his mother lives with us and has generously helped take care of Raquel. We all talked it over and agreed I could go back to college to get a teaching certification for my bachelor's degree, math. Fast forward just a few months, and thanks to an accelerated program and shortage of math teachers in my area, I got my teaching license quite quickly and easily. I also made a few new girlfriends in the teaching program, which helped my self-esteem. So I put out my resume, and within just a few short weeks, I get hired at an independent studies charter school. I was looking to get hired at a regular high school, but whatever. It was a credit recovery school. Basically, the idea was that kids who washed out of the regular school district or couldn't succeed there for whatever reason could try and succeed in our setting. We hosted grades 9 through 12. Students would make appointments and come in with their own time, meet independently with teachers, be given assignments and projects, and basically earn a legit high school diploma eventually. I knew it was kind of weird to go back to a place, high school, where I never fit in, but I thought it would be totally different from the perspective of an adult. The school was one large classroom, the size of a basketball court, with administrative offices, science labs, even an exercise room for PE, all around the perimeter. About 50 student desks were lined around the center of the room in rows, and around these desks were about a dozen teacher desks. Generally, we'd have 2 teachers per subject area, i.e. 2 English, 2 math, 2 history, etc. And we each had our own roster of students, and ensured that they visited all teachers for whose subjects they owed credits. Although the school officially had over 200 students on the various rosters, There were rarely more than 10 or so students in the school at any one time, due to different appointments throughout the day. That meant that there was tons of downtime where teachers would just shoot the breeze with one another. The school had a female principal, a male vice principal, and a male counselor. The other math teacher was male, both English teachers were female, both science teachers were male, and the PE teacher was male. Art teacher female, and the history teachers were one male and one female. There was also a male computer teacher and a female music teacher, both of whom came in once a week. I could see right away from day one that all the teachers were good friends with one another. That's not a bad thing at all. Lunch is at noon every day, and the school shuts down for a whole hour. Typically, the other teachers would all go out to lunch with one another, or break off into 2s and 3s. I didn't really know anyone, so I didn't take offense to anyone not inviting me to go to lunch with them. I thought, well, maybe give it a few weeks and it will change. I had that old feeling from when I was a kid of being rejected. Still, I was the new person, so I tried not to take it personally. Besides, forming relationships, colleagues included, is a two-way street, and I could reach out too. Till then, it was lunch at the desk. Sometimes I'd FaceTime hubby, who usually had lunch at that time too, but I was proud of him for making friends at his own work and tried to minimize taking up his time. I didn't really focus on that too much though, and just did my job. Students tended to like me, and after just a few weeks, it became noticeable that my students made more appointments to see me than other teachers' students made to see them. Every time a student finished a project or assignment for a teacher, whatever the subject, they would turn it in to their main teacher, the one who had the student on their main roster. It soon became clear that students on my roster were finishing their assignments and graduating at a faster rate than my peers. I didn't plan for this to happen, it just turned out that way. Over time, holidays would pass and our school would have mandated social and team building functions, i.e. potluck in the break room, etc. It seems like I was making progress socially. I was always positive and nice to my peers, and would be myself around them, try to tell them about me and learn about them. They were being nice to me too, at least to my face, so I thought I was finally fitting in. One day, however, the principal called me into her office to tell me that someone had told her that I was smug and antisocial, and that it wasn't good for the school environment for teachers to bully one another. I was flabbergasted, and of course, my initial reaction was to ask who told her this, but the principal said it was confidential, and to just work on being nicer. I didn't want to seem intransigent or defiant, so I apologized for hurting anyone's feelings, but also pointed out that I was trying my very best to fit in, and I had been working there the shortest compared to everyone else, so of course I didn't want to overstep. I also pointed out that students on my roster were graduating at a good place. I didn't throw any shade at any of my colleagues. My principal agreed with me on this and praised me heartily. The vice principal happened to be walking by, and he overheard the principal praising me. He too threw in the comment that I was an exemplary teacher, the students were praising me in private to him, and that the school had big plans for me. Especially since we were on pace to outperform another independent studies charter school a few miles away, which competed for the same state funding. This pleased me, of course, and took the edge off the butthurt people telling the principal I was not nice. A small, maybe big, red flag was that they told me the students graduating meant massive funding for our school, money which the regular district didn't want the charter school to have. And that if all teachers could get more students to turn in work, we all might get bonuses. I mean, all that is good, but both of them spoke about student graduation only in terms of how it could benefit our own pocketbooks. Ever since I started working at the school, what had originally been 5 students, 10 at the most working in the classroom at a time, became 20 or more. Almost every one of them a kid on my roster. Every day, hanging out for hours and hours, doing their work in our quiet classroom environment. I thought this was great, because this meant they could graduate sooner and get on with their lives. Gradually, however, I noticed that some of my peers looked resentful when the classroom was so full. I strongly suspect this is because they had grown accustomed to having long stretches of time to simply mess about online at their desks, playing with their smartphones and gossiping. Our school had a policy that unless you were on a break, you had to be at your desk and make yourself available to grade student work in your subject area. They didn't like grading my students' work, because eventually, credit for that student graduating would go to me, their main teacher. I certainly didn't mind grading work from students who were on the other teachers' rosters. Gradually, I came to realize that the school didn't focus so much on actually teaching the students anything, and making sure that their diploma actually meant something, than just rubber stamping their work and saying it was satisfactory, using the fact that we were licensed, credentialed professionals as official backup. Really, any reasonable intelligent adult, or even kid, could do the type of work some of my colleagues were actually doing. What would happen was, say, a kid on my roster is behind 5 credits in English if he wants to graduate. I would then send him to the English teacher to request a packet of English work. Kid would do the work, give it to the English teacher to grade, she would sign it off, I would input the grade in my computer, and the kid would be 1 credit closer to graduation. It soon became clear to me that the teachers weren't actually looking at the packets before giving them a grade. Really, just pulling grades out of their butts. I would never dream of doing that on any student's math work. That's the way they'd grade for me, but they'd do it in a slow way, so as to reduce the speed of students graduating from my roster. As in, they'd let piles of my students' work sit on their desk ungraded, while they played Clash of Clans at their desk. I never said anything, and was always polite and friendly to them, even though I knew at least one of them had badmouthed me to the principal. Needless to say, even months into my new job, I wasn't making friends with my coworkers. I was nice to them, and it seemed at face value that they at least respected me on a professional level, at least to my face, so I'd accept that for the time being. The big switch came when the principal actually singled me out at a staff meeting as an exemplary teacher. She said that I had come from a big city and have succeeded to an amazing degree, and that I had set a record for how many students were graduating high school on my roster. From that point on, I sensed that people were being cold to me. It felt a lot like high school, except unlike high school where other girls would openly mock me as a tall, skinny, no butt, no boobs having giraffe, adults did it in colder ways. On rare occasions where the whole classroom was empty, or if I'd run into groups of them in the break room, they would talk about all these fun things they did together after work, or talk about the big party they were all going to have at such and such venue, and how everyone was invited. Except, obviously, well, I didn't really mind actually. I wasn't going to let them being petty ruin the good feeling I had from helping students and feeling like I was making a difference. I was still very nice to everyone and kept up my positive attitude. Inside, I felt so bad and so left out, however. I didn't tell my husband about basically being shunned at work, and instead, I focused just on my success in getting students to graduate. Anyway, some of my students actually quietly complained to me that Miss So-and-so doesn't even grade our work. I'd never badmouth my coworkers, especially to the kids. It's important to have a united front, of course, but on the sly, I'd separate those work packets that were clearly not graded properly and look them over myself as best I could. Although I was only licensed to teach math, if, say, a history packet seemed incomplete and yet had a B+ nice work on the cover, I'd sort of quietly, as diplomatically as I could, staple a new cover sheet to it, ask the student to finish it for real, and submit it again to the teacher. I'd make sure the student asked the teacher to grade it in front of him or her, as he or she was eager to see the results of all their hard work. Although, the teachers hated it when my kids did this. I did make sure my students' work was as legitimately graded as possible. Somewhat surprisingly, students appreciated my determination that they didn't BS their way through what was obviously a BS school. When it came to other teachers' students coming to me with math packets, I did the professional thing and actually went over the packets, and gave the tests and quizzes as prescribed in that employee handbook for our school, and as is mandated by our state. The other teachers didn't like this. I guess because they were used to teachers just rubber stamping the work as passing, regardless of whether or not it was competently done. Invariably, teachers preferred to send their math kids to the other teacher, because he had no problem just breezing through the packets as if they were flipbooks, and assigning whatever grade he dreamed of. However, even though for him to just scribble C+, please show work for each equation, on packet covers took no time at all, and he could go back to searching up dating profiles on OkCupid. I found out eventually that he was already married. He resented the fact that he graded perhaps 20 math packets in one day, whereas I graded maybe 5, because I graded them and assigned the tests and everything, which of course took time. Eventually, other teachers began to grumble too, how I was taking too long to grade their kids' packets and thus slowing down their students' graduations, whereas mine were graduating relatively faster. I began to hear rumours that kids only came to see me, especially the boys, because they wanted to screw me. Naturally, the rumours eventually spread that I actually was banging the kids. Other rumours spread that I was unqualified to be a math teacher. What was a woman doing being a math teacher anyway? I was just trying to hook up with young studs. All sorts of nonsense. Still, more rumours spread that I was cheating with my graduation rates and that it was all fraud somehow. My husband Doug had actually come to see me on a couple of other occasions at the school to go with me to doctor's appointments so the staff knew what he looked like. One day, I had my phone out on my desk when Clayton called me to tell the news that he and Sarah were coming to visit next month. Unfortunately, for my reputation at that school, Clayton's contact avatar showed hugely on my phone screen when he called in the middle of the day, and one of my busybody coworkers happened to be walking by my desk, saw my phone, and made a face of barely concealed contempt. This story is really long, so I'm gonna have to end it there for today, but it's gonna be really good tomorrow or in like a few hours when we release the next one, so you gotta stick around for this. I'm really sorry for leaving you on a cliffhanger, but do make sure you subscribe so that you check part 2 whenever it's uploaded.